know what? I believe that a church that has a good, healthy budget, no matter where it is, whether it's small budget or millions of dollars, I believe they can have greater kingdom impact if they have greater clarity on their budget.
Welcome to Stewardology, a podcast where two worlds collide. In this show, financial advisor Tim Russell and Pastor Drew Gysi are joined by me, producer Tyler Rutherford, to explore the intersection of financial stewardship and theology. Their unique perspectives help Christians and churches understand and apply a biblical framework for everyday financial decisions so Christians everywhere can grow in their walk with Christ through biblical stewardship. Before we get started, we just wanted you to know that the topics discussed in this podcast are for general information only and are not intended to provide specific investment advice or recommendations. Investment and investment strategies involve risk, including the potential loss of principal, and past performance is not a guarantee of future results. Securities and advisory services are offered through Genius Wealth Management, member FINRA, and SIPC. Without further ado, here are your hosts, Tim Russell, Drew Gysi, and Tyler Rutherford. Hi, everybody. Welcome to another episode of the Stewardology Podcast. My name is Tyler, and I'm here with my co-host, Drew Gysi.
Hey, good to see everybody today.
So Drew Gysi was a pastor for a long time.
28 plus years.
And in some capacity, you still function as a shepherd among the people.
I do.
Which is awesome. And that actually opens up a lot of great conversation for today. Today's episode is called Ask the Pastor, Church Finance Edition.
Wow.
So real fun and exciting stuff. Nothing says fun and exciting like the IRS and Excel spreadsheets and all those things, right?
And pastoral taxes on top of that. Yeah, sure.
Super exciting. But it is important because we have to remember we are stewards of everything that God has entrusted to us. Mm-hmm. And the church is no different, right? The church budget, like all these resources it's all resources God has provided. And so we are tasked with managing them well. And there's a lot of different questions we can get into surrounding the topic of church finances. So in this episode, I actually put out a calling card to our social media audiences, a little bit of a plug for our social media. If you're not yet connected to us on Facebook or Instagram, every once in a while, I put out some questions where I harvest, or I put out posts where I harvest questions from you guys or topics you're interested in hearing about. So if you're interested in having your voice heard or your question answered, obviously you can reach out to us.
Just emails.
Yeah. We respond to everything, but just make sure you follow our social media pages so you don't miss out on anything that we're doing on there. But in the meantime,
these questions came from our social media listeners.
These questions came primarily from Facebook, which is exciting. But money is important, especially in the life of the church. We have to remember that Jesus talked a lot about money. He talked about money or used money analogies a lot more than he even talked about like heaven and hell. Mm-hmm. Right? It's a lot of stuff that he said about money. And so it's important to recognize this because money does reflect our heart. It's just the reality. So buckle up, grab your coffee, whatever it is you're doing. Let's tune in to Ask the Pastor, Church Finance Edition. So Drew, the first question submitted in our Ask the Pastor episode here is a big one. Is the threat of churches losing their tax status legit? And if so, what would that mean for the church?
Great question. Being a student of the church for decades and being involved and knowing not perfectly, but understanding some of where our government here in the United States is it a threat? Yeah. It very well could be. Not saying it is, but it very well could be. I guess the bigger question that comes behind that maybe was not asked, but implied in the question, what would that mean? So if it is a threat, and let's say the church tax status is pulled, there's a potential that giving may go down. Now, often I hear in our seminars that people are giving and they're looking at it as that tax deduction that they're getting. Now the government keeps on raising the
standard deduction.
Exactly. That's what I was trying to remember.
I got you.
So thank you for covering me on that one. So that standard deduction has been increasing. So unlikely people are giving to that minimum for the standard deduction. But there was a point where there was that capability that's there.
Can I explain why that's important?
Yes,
really
please
quickly?
do.
So if you're confused, like standard deduction giving, why does that matter? Well, because when you do your taxes at the end of the year, there's a standard deduction that the IRS offers to basically deduct your income down to a certain amount. Now, most people are going to take that because it's pretty high. I think for a married couple, it's sitting around the $30,000 mark.
Right around that, yeah.
See the IRS for more exact numbers on your given year. But anyway, so that means that in order to itemize on your taxes, i.e. deduct even more of your income so that less of it is taxable, that means you have to give even more to a nonprofit organization like the church.
Right.
So the standard deduction is going up and it's so high, a lot of people don't even worry about itemizing their taxes anymore because the standard deduction is so high. So that's why those two things are important.
2 Corinthians was not given with this American tax code in our minds, so it wasn't there. We're supposed to give out of gratitude, out of a grateful, cheerful heart. That's how we're supposed to give. There's a lot of people who want to see a church's 501c3 status just eliminated and eradicated. Why is that? Because the church has such good influence. If the church is doing what it's called to do and reaching its own Jerusalem, Judea, Samaria, and uttermost parts of the world, when that happens, we are having a great kingdom impact. And some people don't want that church to have it. Why? They want how they can interact that and intercede that is saying, hey, let's strip this nonprofit status from the church. And some of them are being more political at times, and they're saying, we got to have separation of church and state, which really is not listed within our Constitution, bylaws, and all those pieces there. It's not listed there. So very important that's there. Though people are trying to strive and push and get that taken care of and get that eradicated, unlikely that is going to happen. The church is still very active and it will have it. In fact, churches are automatically, when they are birthed, they are automatically grandfathered into this 501c3 status. And according to the U.S. tax code. Now, there are churches that choose to apply for an official 501c3 status. Difference that's there is, one, you're grandfathered in because you are a nonprofit, because you are a church, but the other is, I'm applying for it. Why is that? Because some churches want to apply for this 501c3 status because they can get grants, they can get donations from from for-profit organizations that want to give generously. There's different places out there where churches can tag on to different probably technology companies that are out there that are offering free or discounted services to a 501c3 nonprofit status entity, which could be a church, and they then get that discount, which can be extreme for that church. One of the things that I have learned that's out there, and I've learned specifically from one of our partner ministries, National Center for Life and Liberty, ncll.org. Love the guys, David Gibbs III and his whole team there. One of the things, as I traveled with him and his team for an entire month years ago, he knows and understands legal pieces like none other within the legal field and church field together. He gets it, knows it, and understands it. And his high recommendation is for a church not to apply for the official 501c3 status, to choose not to go there. You're automatically there as a church, according to the U.S. tax code. Whether it's an old church or whether it's a new church, you're automatically there. Once you apply for it, now you're under their umbrella. Now you have to subscribe to all their paperwork and all those pieces. And if you start then getting those bonuses and perks and everything else from that official 501c3 status, if that happens, then what the government says is what the church has to do. And if I remember right and process right, but I would highly recommend contact ncll.org and David Gibbs and the third and his team, and they can actually talk you through that. But I am not a fan of having a church get a 501c3 status. Stay in the grandfathered arena of that in the tax code, and from there, carry out your work that you need to do. People should not give just because of that tax code status that they have. We should give because of our heart for the kingdom work that is there. So I will say, through my lenses, has it been trying to be encroached on, to be eliminated? Yes, you hear that every so many years, but unlikely it's going to happen. There will be battles because the church should be having community and worldwide impact. And if we're doing our job right, we need the generosity of believers to be able to make that thing happen.
So if just to summarize what you said, it sounds like, is it a possibility? Sure. It's a threat. Yeah. Is it likely? Probably not, at least right now.
Yeah.
And the people that it would impact mostly are givers to the church. And from there, because we're supposed to be giving out of gratitude and not for a tax deduction, it really shouldn't matter anyway.
Shouldn't matter
for
at
the
all.
giver.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. So the next question, this is more on a tactical side of things. What does the ideal church budget look like? Is there one? What would be some red flags to look for in a church budget?
What a great question. I actually do a talk for pastors on having a kingdom-focused budget, church budget, and I use that kingdom as an acrostic to kind of lay out the different areas of it. I'm weird. I admit I enjoy church budgets. I geek out on church budgets. So
everybody just flashed back to their most recent church business meeting, and they're like,
Yeah. But I actually enjoy the budget. It's in fact, I'm the deacon of finance at my church, and Tyler, we both go to the same church. I actually love budget times to be able to go there and kind of crunch the numbers and make it all work. So the answer, there is no such thing as an ideal church budget. Every church is its own living entity. It's got its own pieces and dynamics. It's got its own priorities. So though some should be similar, because we're told to reach people, disciple people, see lives change and transform. That's where a large portion of our resources should go toward. But when you start thinking about churches like, Tyler, the church you and I are part of, we were able to merge with another church that was dying, and they had, I think, about 11 to 13 people that were left, and they were what year was that church built?
Oh,
1850
something.
Yeah, that's what I thought it was, 1850 something. So we're in an 1850s country church, stone originally. Now they put plaster on the outside building. And when you have a church that has its own property, not all churches do, but when you have a church that has its own property, what the challenges can be is, especially when you have a church that is as old as ours, there's a lot of maintenance, upkeep, and care. You got a lot of work to do. So there you can be pouring a lot of the resources for maintenance, upkeeps, repairs. The facility management could be greater. If you have a bigger facility, your care and maintenance for cleaning and just inspections and other things will be more extensive. And the problem is that since the pandemic, the facility costs have not gone down. In fact, they've astronomically gone up. And not even just that, but I'll even say I just had a meeting just last week with the insurance person for our church, and just seeing the cost of insurance is going up. And it's just because of the nature of the insurance world and how they're dealing with things right now. So these facilities are costing more. And you need to be careful. Actually, I think as I process the various costs that are involved, I do know of a church that actually had to recently get themselves out of their building. because they could not sustain themselves in that building anymore. And another church actually came alongside and purchased that building. And now they have that building. They're going to build a ministry that's there. But that other church is still going to be alive. It's still going to serve, but they're going to pick another location as a rental location that they're going to have, so they don't have the costly overhead of the facility that they just had. So I think it's important to kind of process that. You got to be careful where you're putting your money and where things are at. And if it's sustainable to be able to handle those things, by all means, you want to do that.
So it seems like context matters depending on where you're at and where you're in the life stage of your church.
That's a good point.
Well, another question I have for you within this question, how much of the church budget, you think of the pie, how much of that pie should be staffing?
Oh, my. You know what? I get that question often, and that's when I do budget reviews. In fact, I offer that to many churches that we do seminars at, and a lot of churches take me up on that. Years ago, pre-pandemic, right around between 35 and 40-ish, 45-ish would be a ceiling, would be what you would spend on church staffing.
Like 35 to 45%.
Percent of the entire income would go toward that. I'd like to say that back pre-pandemic, a healthy number was right around 38 to 40%. And if you could get it down to 35, that would be a big win. Post-pandemic, what I'm seeing is right around the 50-ish, 55-ish. It's costing more because it costs more to live. You want to make sure you pay your pastor and pay them a very good salary. So I'm seeing a creep above that 50 percentile. Now, I'm going to throw an exception in there. So if there is a church, and I'll call it a startup church, and they're just now launching and getting going. Like, Tyler, you and I have been part of our church since its inception. It's only, maybe 5-6 years old, give or take-ish. We have always had our church budget, that slice of the pie for staffing, has always been above 60%. I used to tell my pastor, our pastor, Tyler, I used to tell him often, it's not sustainable. It's not sustainable. We're going to have to adjust things down the road. And I remember one time he and I sat down and he said, I get that. I know that. I understand that. But he had to share with me either first or again, the model that we have is we will always, always, always have a high staffing figure. Okay, Pastor, why? Well, our goal is to always have an additional pastor on staff so that when we grow big enough, we're going to kick that person out of the nest of our local congregation, send some people with them, and start another congregation. Mm-hmm. Oh, I love that model. Yeah. I love that model. But what we're doing is we're sacrificing other things within our pie to say we're going to add that additional staff member. So our staffing is constantly going to be high, but it's part of the DNA. It's part of our goal for today and tomorrow for our church. So you may look at your church budget and say, why are we spending 60%? Well, maybe you don't have the right answer. Like I didn't right away, but I have now, and I've bought in, and I believe because we are getting ready to start a second church within this year. So where that one person's going to be kicked out of the nest, boom, go, and we're going to be able to take care of things. So very good processing when it comes to that as you look at that. One other thing I want to jump in to consider when it comes to church budgeting, you got to bring into the idea of what kind of camps, schools, other things that are there. Does it have a counseling program? Our church has a counseling ministry that's part of it. That's going to be an additional cost that's there. Now, some of these things may have a revenue income coming in. And again, our counseling session, our counseling group within our church, it will have revenue coming in, but it is also set up as a not-profit organization. So we're going to be able to get some kickback from some of the monies we have put out to actually get that thing operational. So processing all that, there's so many variables that are there. I think that's important that we just kind of look at it. You got to get that bigger picture. But please, 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 don't just come in like guns a-blazing, and you're ready to take somebody down because of what you see on paper. You need to get the why behind it.
Yeah, context matters. And if you're interested in doing a church budget review, reach out to us through our website. Just go to contact us at the stewardologypodcast.com website. Just go to the contact us page and reach out, and we'd be happy to set something up for you. And if you're a pastor and that interests you, hey,
I love doing that.
Yeah,
because you know what? I believe that a church that has a good, healthy budget, no matter where it is, whether it's small budget or millions of dollars, I believe they can have greater kingdom impact if they have greater clarity on their budget.
Yeah, that's good. All right, so the third question, this is an interesting one. Love to hear your thoughts. Do you think that there may come a time when it may be necessary for churches to adopt the bivocational pastors-elders model, where elders and pastors have a job outside of the church, which may help free funds in the church for other ministries? This is an interesting and very specific question. I'm curious to hear your thoughts.
I have quite a few friends that I've gotten to know through the years of Life Institute that are bivocational in their ministries. We just worked with a few earlier on this year, and I have great regard for them in their bivocational work because they're trying to shepherd and pastor a congregation and lead it forward along with earning an income to take care of their family.
Yeah, amen. Wow.
I love those men.
It's stressful enough just to be a pastor, but to have to do two jobs essentially is just...
That's exactly what it is. It's two jobs.
Plus, as a pastor, not only are you a pastor, you wear all the hats within the church. Like, oh man,
you're preaching it, brother.
God bless these guys. Seriously.
Yeah, there's no question about it. But everything, you got to look at the contextual aspects of the church. One pastor I'm thinking about specifically is they went through a major shift economically in their community and had quite a few handful of families that were part of a local big business that were transferred out. So as they were transferred out, they did not have that income source coming in. So he had to reduce his hours working at the church and get outside income to be able to handle that.
Interesting.
So I've seen those things happen, but I've also seen just your small town pastor, which I love the small town pastor, that they are saying, you know what, I'm going to shepherd the people, I'm going to care for the people, I'm going to preach and teach to the people, but I also need to take 20, 30, or 35 hours a week, and I'm going to pour into a job, either having their own painting business, garage doors, whatever it may be, or work for somebody else for that period of time, just to be able to make ends meet financially. So everything is different that's there. I think the intention should be that, as we see in Acts 6, where the elders are created the office of deacon, let's put those people to work and let's allow them to help out and make things happen within the church. Bivocational elders, pastors, it's not the ideal in today's society, but it can be a reality because some churches, because of the stage that they're in, it may be a necessity for a season. Now, I like this question because they use this phrase to free up funds for other ministries. It's like saying, I'm taking it two ways. In one way, I'm taking it, Pastor, we understand that, hey, it's good, we get the message and stuff like that, but there's other things that are more important than the Sunday morning gathering and Sunday morning message that's going to recharge us and get us out there to do the work of the gospel. Ouch. Don't like that part.
Yeah.
But there's another part, how I take it, it's like, hey, we got some other things that we want to do, but the only way we can pull it off is if we can reduce some salaries. So I see it two different ways. I'm going to try to answer it more on the second end because
the more graceful way.
More the graceful way. But I understand the heart behind the question. and it's a good heart. But what's more important than the prayer and faithful times as a congregation spending in the Word? Because we see that as a command that we ought to be doing that. While it's absolutely worthwhile to have a full-time pastor, you will absolutely get great benefit if that person is doing the role as the shepherd leader there in the church. That's going to help propel your church forward and make things happen. So I get that, I know that, but the bottom line is my 2 cents would be, let's look elsewhere and get creative. And how can we have monies to be able to do other things? Maybe it's because your church hasn't been challenged about giving and generosity. That's what we do with Life Institute. We come alongside and we help people understand that maybe they are part of that 2.3% of their income that they're giving that we talked about in the last episode. Maybe we can encourage them to kick it up to 5%, and if they can move that needle, then greater kingdom impact can happen in that local church. So it could be something like that, or maybe there's just being misappropriation of funds, not in a malicious way, but maybe it needs to be refocused. Maybe there's ministries that really should be kind of shaved off, that have been going on for decades, that are not seeing fruitful lives being changed and transformed. Maybe we need to pull that out. So again, that's where I would say a good, hearty discussion about the church budget and what the priorities are of the church. That needs to be a very healthy discussion. A final thought is, my last pastor was what they call a turnaround church. I came in knowing that they didn't have money to cover much at all, not let alone my salary coming in there, which I took a major salary cut to come on board to be a part of it. But I will say, when we put the call to the people to rise up, to give generously, because we wanted to see a specific outreach happen within our community by our people through this church, it was amazing that we had income come in that exceeded what our weekly income was. And we didn't see our weekly income dip, because I encourage people to give above what they typically give. I'm a firm believer. God owns a cattle on 1,000 hills. The money is there. We just need to, as shepherds, let them know what the purpose is, what it's for. We had accountability. We had people in the congregation come together and come up with ideas of how we were going to use the money. And I will tell you, we had some amazing growth because we intentionally reached out with money we did not have budgeted, but money that people gave because we put that encouragement before them. This is what we want to do. This is how we want to do it. And it was amazing to see what God did. I loved those years and seeing that happen. So I sit back and I think about this. Maybe we don't need to release the pastor to free the funds. Maybe we need to have good stewardship education for the congregation as a whole. And that's what we do with Life Institute. No commercial here, just reality. Sometimes it's just a knowing and understanding about personal finance, budgeting, debt elimination, generosity, and putting all that together and putting some good teaching behind people so they can step up and give, so lives will be changed and transformed.
Drew, I think that's good. And there's a passage in 1 Timothy that says, "Let the elders who rule well be considered worthy of double honor, especially those who labor in preaching and teaching. The laborer deserves his wages." I don't know if you've ever preached a sermon or counseled a couple through a really hard marital situation, but man, it's hard work. It's really hard work. And so in my mind, why would we want our pastor to be bivocational? We should be doing what we can to bless him and his family by allowing him to focus on just the ministry there, right? So that's kind of where I would land in this question. Like, bivocational pastorate, worst case scenario maybe, right? But
or a season.
Or a season,
just
right?
a season.
But we should do everything we can to make sure that the pastor can do his job to the best of his ability. And how do we do that? By allowing him to focus on one job at a time and not worry about, all the other things he has to do outside of just being a pastor.
I believe that a pastor who has a heart for prayer and a heart for teaching. I think more can happen in that church community and in that community by getting him to be able to have that focused time of prayer and serving the people and serving the community, not just him by himself, but with his congregation. More will happen by keeping that person full time than it would be to having that person having a dual allegiance.
Exactly.
That's in there.
I think that's wise.
Yeah.
It's wise. All right, fourth question. I think this will be a faster one. How should you, i.e. the church, how should you decide the pastor's salary and benefits and other staff? How do we approach that topic?
I love that question. And I think the best example that I have seen that I think is good across any community, and any community, not just U.S., but worldwide, is what my one church did. That I was at my largest church that I served, and came on board as youth pastor, discipleship pastor, executive pastor, and what we did is there was a spreadsheet that the one gentleman put together. He was a spreadsheet guru. He loved spreadsheets. He did not use Microsoft Word for communication. He used spreadsheets. It was so fun to see that. But he wound up putting this spreadsheet together, and every year they found out what was the going salary for a local school teacher. And whatever that school teacher was, let's say it's an entry-level school teacher. They are coming in with just a 4-year degree. He built this spreadsheet out, which worked phenomenally, where if it's an entry level, this is what your income is. So if the income level, we'll just say, is $40,000 for a first-time teacher coming in, and let's say it's me, Pastor Drew, you're hired me, and I'm just fresh out of Bible college, not seminary, not anything else, Bible college. Well, guess what? They would say that my income would be equivalent to that as the local teacher. Now, let's fast forward 10 years. You got a master's, you got 10 years experience. You're now just coming on board. Find out what the local school is paying for somebody that has 10 years experience and a master's degree. That should be the equivalent. That has really worked well. Now, I like that, but the thing is, with a school, they typically have those variations. If you come in and you don't have that master's, if you finally get it, boom, you get a pay increase. And then if you get your doctorate, you get a pay increase. Well, our church, what they put it together, if you have one kid, this is what you get. If you have a second kid, they're going to bump you up a little bit more. If you get your master's, you get this. If you get your doctorate, you get this. So they had all these great nuances and pieces in there, but they never followed through in the end. So, yeah. Does it hurt the pastor when they see this as the promise, but yet it never comes through? I get that, know that, understand it, and thank you, Lord, that I had that position, and I loved my years that were there. So I'm not faulting them for that. But if you're going to set something up like that, set it up that way and follow through, and maybe encouraging your people, hey, look, our pastor just got his doctorate. We made a promise to him. We need to get a couple extra dollars up there because of his hard work, and we're benefiting greatly because of his labors. So it's one of those things. But I would say whatever the going rate for the person in the school district that has a similar position, similar education, similar years of experience, that should be the baseline for the pastor. Mm-hmm. Now, I say that school district-wise because the school district where I lived in here in Pennsylvania back when I was in that church, high rent. Big, expensive, one of the top 2 or 3 areas in the Pennsylvania area. I can go out to Wisconsin to another place, and it would be 2/3 less. So you go with what is local in your community, not with what is a baseline across the board. Does that make sense?
No, I think that's great, and I like that you use the word baseline, especially considering like school districts in our area have great benefits. Generally speaking, like public schools have amazing benefits. So and because of that, they might get less like pay in their take home. But, it's all relative. And I think it's important to understand, like, hey, this is just giving you an idea of what a livable wage could be. And obviously, if you can be a blessing as a church to pay your pastor more, if they're studying and preaching well and they're doing good labors.
Worthy of double honor.
Exactly. Bless them if you can. I think that's a really good way to look at it.
And I'll throw one other thing. You talked about benefits. And can I just say, take good care of your pastor benefit-wise. Mm-hmm. You may not be able to spend a lot of money on benefits. I get that, know that, understand it. Two things. Number one, make sure he has a retirement plan. Mm-hmm. Did I say make sure? I meant make sure he has a retirement plan and that he's putting into it. Please do that. And then another piece, make sure he has vacation time and he uses it. My wife listens to this. She will then say, Drew, you said this, but you didn't live it. That's exactly right. I look back and I see the error of my ways. If I went back and tried to get my vacation time from my previous ministries, I'd probably be done working for the rest of my life. But the bottom line is make sure they have it. They don't have to go away. They just need to get away from the church and shut the phone off, tone out, get the elders and deacons to jump on board, but make sure you give a generous, healthy vacation or personal days off, whatever that may be, for your pastor. And as you can increase benefits, by all means do so. Be a blessing to them. They work hard day and night.
Yeah, good health insurance is a great investment.
Amen.
All right, so the last question we have on today's episode of Ask the Pastor Church Finance Edition. Now, we've mentioned this briefly on other episodes, so if you haven't gotten the full spiel, make sure you go back and listen to a little bit of our backlog. But the question is, what are some good practices for financial transparency to the congregation? And is there a point where you're sharing too much?
Well, you should never share anything to the congregation. Keep them in
Complete
the dark
secrecy.
at all. Keep them in the dark at all times. They should know nothing at all. Okay, I just got myself in hot water. So, no, I mean, I'm a big fan. Total transparency to a degree. What does that mean? We want to have transparency. We want to do things. Good practices ought to be for the church, as you see in different businesses and other things. The church should be totally transparent with their income, with their expenses, where things are going, how it's being expended. I think that's very important. But let's not get down to the minute dollar and cent. I think we can get a little crazy. Those that do bookkeeping ought to do that. But those of us who are part of the congregation, you know what? Grace abounds. And I think that's important. One of the things that I've learned when I was a pastor is I remember sitting in congregational meetings, and this was back in the day when they had transparencies and overhead projectors. I am that old. I am that old. And they would take it and they would print something up on a inkjet printer and then put it up there. And they would circle different things, but they would put all the salaries. And in my first church, there was 3 or 4 of us on staff, and I was youth pastor. They put all of our salaries right up there on the screen for everybody to see. None of us enjoyed that.
Yeah.
We totally disliked that. Now, I get that. I know that. I understand that. I'm the deacon of finance at my church. I know what all of our guys are making. I see the numbers. Well, it's part of my job in that. I am not a fan of exposing the pastor's salary or the staffing individual salaries to the congregation. Now, typically you have a couple people on staff, not always, but if you have a couple people, that whether it's a couple pastoral staff, couple support staff, whatever it may be, could be janitorial, admin, whatever, lump them together. Mm-hmm. Say, this is what we're spending on salaries. Now, I'm not saying that you don't share that information of the minute details. I am saying when you're at a congregational meeting, chunk it together. This is what we're spending on pastors. This is what we're spending on support staff. This is what we're spending for those pieces. If somebody has a question about it, I am a firm believer of transparency. You can come to the church office. We will print out or bring up on our computer screen what it is that you need to know. Sorry, we're not going to print it up and give it to you to let you walk away from. We're not going to let you take a photograph of it because we don't want this to be broadcast publicly. But what we are going to say is, yes, you can know about this. But we may even ask a few questions like, is there a reason behind it? Because some people, the church, sadly, it has people that just have an axe to grind. Let's not feed into that. And if there's a need, get deacons and elders involved to be able to just make sure that you work toward having the heart of the person doing it in a right and proper way. If it's because they feel like that they're being paid too much, let's have that conversation offline. If it's because that we sense that they're not being paid enough, let's have that conversation offline, but not in the heart of the congregation. Yeah. I don't think that's wise and healthy.
Yeah, from a pew sitter's perspective, yes, because that's where I sit. I'm a pew sitter. It's my category, is my label.
You sit in a chair, not a pew.
But it's not just about knowing what your pastor is making, because like on one hand, you might want to know, but it's not, like, at least in my mind, it's not because I'm curious about what my pastor is making. It's more about like, hey, what's the health of the church relative to like what we're paying pastors? Because like, you've heard the horror stories where churches are sinking and pastors manipulate the budget to pay themselves more, and they know they're on a sinking ship. Like, I would say most cases, that's not at all what is happening.
That's a rare situation.
Exactly.
Nowadays. It's there, but it's rare.
Exactly. So I think from a pew sitter perspective, it's not wrong to want to know, and maybe that information is helpful. But I think like when the church finance committee compromises and say, you know what, like we're just going to bundle all the salaries together, so relative to the overall budget, this is what we're spending on salary. In my opinion, for me, that's more than enough to know, like, all right, we're healthy, we're on track, we're doing well.
Now, I want to throw one little thing. I so appreciate what you shared, but many of us take a look and we look at the salaries and we say, okay, this is what the salaries are. I'm just going to be honest. The church we're a part of, you look at the salary package, our pastor makes more than me.
Oh, sure.
He's younger than me by much. He makes more than me. There's a caveat here. What is that? He does not have benefits.
He's paying his own benefits.
He's paying his own benefits.
Yep.
He's 100% his own benefits, except for vacation time.
Sure.
I mean, that's part of the vacation, part of the benefits of vacation
like health
time.
insurance, retirement plan, all that's on him.
100%.
Yep.
So you need to know more than just what the numbers are saying.
Exactly.
You need to know the backstory and what all those pieces are. And I've already talked with our pastors, and we have an executive pastor at our church. I've already shared with him that down the road, I would like to be able to offload some of that and be able to have us as a church cover some of those benefit pieces so we can be a greater blessing to them because of their ministry.
For sure. I think that's great. And 1 Corinthians 4 lays it out that it's not recommended, it's required that stewards are found faithful with the resources that we've been entrusted with. So expecting that out of your church is a good thing, right? It's a biblical expectation that we're faithful with God's resources. The church isn't exempt from that. So as a pew sitter, hey, great, be curious, ask questions, right? But I think we can cross lines when we're trying to be malicious about it. And I know we've talked about this in previous episodes.
Have the right heart behind the questions,
exactly,
please.
Exactly.
Please. And the church leaders, I'm talking to you. Do not hide anything. That creates even more questions, more complications. So be transparent, be open. But here's what it comes to. Everyday financial decisions must be made with integrity.
Amen.
And if you're making everyday financial decisions with integrity, you will have nothing to hide.
Amen.
I can't say that enough and enough. So do that, be transparent, but then yet when you have congregational times, it doesn't hurt to pull it in, clump things together. So, I mean, I've never seen in a church it's going to be expose your salary to church to your church day, where everybody brings their IRS tax forms and they're showing how much they made. I mean, that's not a day that happens in the church.
That sounds like a terrible day.
But it is a day that happens in congregational meetings for the pastor. So let's be careful and honest and caring for our pastor. And I mean, if you have a solo pastor, it's going to be a different budget.
Yeah.
You're going to see that up there. That's part of what that is, and expect that dollar figure, as we talked about earlier. It's going to be higher because you want to give them that living wage to be able to earn.
Now, most of this question was about general financial transparency, but a lot of what we shared was around the salaries, and I think that's because, generally speaking, those two tend to be connected the most. But you can operate with the same principles based off other kinds of funding, whether it's missionary funding or
Deacons fund. I'll use
Deacons
that.
fund, program funding.
I know
all
of a
that kind
church that actually had a problem where the pastor was dipping into the deacons fund.
Oh boy.
And he was using it not for his own purposes, but for his own pet projects in the community.
Oh boy.
And it was not good.
Yeah.
And I'll just go as far as saying I had to confront him. It was where I was working.
Yeah.
So it was not. So it's one of those things. That's why I say integrity with finances on all levels, whether it's missions, deacons fund, church budget, whatever it may be.
Yeah.
Integrity will always allow you to have transparency.
Amen.
But once you don't have integrity in the church finances, transparency will slowly fade, and it creates more problems and complications.
At the end of the day, church finances are not just about balancing budgets. They're about faithfully stewarding the resources that God has entrusted to his people for the sake of his kingdom and for the sake of the ministry. Whether it's how we compensate pastors, fund ministries, maintain transparency, you name it, all of these things should reflect biblical wisdom, gospel priorities, and most importantly, the heart to glorify the Lord. So the next time someone says, hey, let's chat about church finances, don't roll your eyes and don't.
I won't. I love church finances.
Drew gets very excited about church finances.
I do.
And also don't immediately go to gossip, right? Operate with grace in church finances. Really know what you're talking about and know all of the different nuances that go on in church finances. It's complicated.
It is.
It's so complicated, but it's important. And realize that it is part of our worship and our responsibility as stewards to do this well. As we close out, I just want to pass on 2 Corinthians 8:20-21 to you. It says, we want to avoid any criticism of the way we administer this liberal gift, for we are taking pains to do what is right, not only in the eyes of the Lord, but also in the eyes of men. May this be the heart behind all the church does, specifically with the generous gifts that the Lord has provided to the church through his people. We'll see you next week on the Stewardology Podcast. Thanks for joining us on the Stewardology Podcast, where financial stewardship and theology meet. We'd like to help you take your next steps in biblical financial stewardship. Subscribe in your podcast provider to get the newest episode delivered to you every week. Leave a 5-star rating and review to help new listeners find the show. Take advantage of your free personal stewardship review at stewardologypodcast.com/review. Be sure to follow us on social media and visit our website at stewardologypodcast.com for tons of free resources and hundreds of free episodes. You can also leave episode ideas at stewardologypodcast.com/idea. Remember, Psalm 20, verse 7, some trust in chariots and some trust in horses, but we trust in the name of the Lord our God. See you next week.